Well, that's a whole thing now. Good evening and welcome to an unprecedentedly late edition of MesmePolitics. My name is Toby Lepatty Mesme and I am live with you, bringing you all the news of the last 24 hours in the UK and the US political scene from a leftist perspective. It's just gone 8:30. And welcome to a, for one time only, 90 minutes later than usual edition of MesmePolitics. I'm Toby Lepatty Mesme. It is Monday, the 4th of January 2021, and we are heading into, we're basically in, a full March-style national lockdown. Nothing as draconian as this has been brought in by the Prime Minister since the original lockdown in March. We have the hope over the horizon of a vaccination programme. We have an opposition that has been almost entirely toothless in its line on this. And we have a situation where the government of the day appears unable to grasp the severity of the crisis they're in until the last minute, time and time again. We have a broken political system, we have a morally bankrupt, an ideas-free political class. Now more than ever we need a new kind of politics, and now more than ever we're resorted to stuffy managerialism. Get in touch throughout the show tonight, it's going to be a big one. Get in touch in the chat. Come say hello, give me your thoughts on everything going on. We welcome a variety of perspectives on this. It is certainly a rough news day for a lot of people, and if you're suffering because of what you've heard, or you're just suffering, we are here for you. We'll get you through this, we'll provide you the information, and we would, of course, at the top of the show, like to advise you to follow all government guidelines and laws. This is for our own protection as citizens, and we must follow it. So, the first and biggest story of the day, overwhelmingly so, Boris Johnson has announced a new national lockdown with emergency measures to control the rapid spread of coronavirus, following intense pressure from ministers and unions to do so. During a televised address on Monday, the Prime Minister announced that tougher restrictions will come into force from midnight tonight, as the UK saw a record 58,784 more lab-confirmed coronavirus infections, with a further 407 deaths. Mr Johnson said, "As I speak to you tonight, our hospitals are under more pressure from COVID than at any time since the start of the pandemic." It comes as Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon announced a lockdown for Scotland until the end of January, with a legal requirement to stay at home and schools closed to most pupils until February. The new lockdown will remain in place until the middle of February, and ministers will keep the measures under constant review, said Mr Johnson, and urging everyone in England to stay at home from tonight if possible. For those living under Tier 4, which includes more than 3/4 of the population of England, things will remain largely unchanged. Other areas in lower tiers will see non-essential shops closed, hospitals household mixing banned, don't want to mix hospitals, and people will only be allowed to leave their homes for a limited number of reasons, such as work, childcare, and medical reasons. But the Prime Minister also tightened some restrictions even further, and the upcoming lockdown is closer in resemblance to the lockdown imposed last March than the second one in November. People should only leave home to go to work if it is impossible, quote, for them to work from home, such as workers in the construction industry. They should only shop for necessities, and outdoor exercise, which can include one other person, should ideally be limited to once a day. This is stricter than current Tier 4 rules, which allow people to do unlimited amounts of exercise outdoors, and of course, outdoor sports venues such as tennis courts will have to close. After teaching unions piled pressure on the government to keep schools closed due to serious risk of staff falling ill, while the infection rate was so high, the government has announced that all primary schools, secondary schools and colleges in England must close and switch to remote learning, except for vulnerable children and children of key workers. People who are clinically vulnerable, who were previously told to shield, should stay at home and only leave for medical appointments and exercise, said Mr Johnson. Places of worship can remain open, but must adhere to social distancing rules. Restaurants, most of which have had to stay closed for dining in weeks under tiers 3 and 4, will see a new rule put in place which bans them from offering takeaway or click and collect of alcoholic drinks. They can continue offering food delivery or takeaway. Weddings and civil ceremonies can still take place, but only in exceptional circumstances, and only 6 people will be allowed to attend. Funerals can still have a maximum of 30 guests, but wakes and other ceremonial events will be restricted to 6 people. This is the Prime Minister.
In England, we must therefore go into a national lockdown which is tough enough to contain this variant. That means the government is once again instructing you to stay at home. You may only leave home for limited reasons permitted in law, such as to shop for essentials, to work if you absolutely cannot work from home, to seek medical assistance, such as getting a COVID test, or to escape domestic abuse. The full details of what you can and can't do will be available at gov.uk/coronavirus. If you are clinically extremely vulnerable, we're advising you to begin shielding again, and you will shortly receive a letter about what this means for you. And because we now have to do everything we possibly can to stop the spread of the disease, primary schools, secondary schools, and colleges across England must move to remote provision from tomorrow, except for vulnerable children and the children of key workers.
That's Boris Johnson there. Initial thoughts, bearing in mind this was only 37 minutes ago, this is, for all intents and purposes, March 2.0. There are differences, but this is almost identical to the measures that we saw brought in March. The November lockdown did get the R rate below 1, did make a serious dent in the virus, made a serious difference. However, with this new strain, this was very much the bare minimum that was going to be proposed. Many were urging the government to go even further than this. This feels like it's struck the right balance, and if people adhere to it, if the government supports them in adhering to it, this should get the R rate down. And we should all look at it as a national effort. This was necessary. It was too late, shockingly too late, from the government, but the measures that have been brought in are absolutely what we needed to see brought in. We need to see these brought in before Christmas. The U-turn, the sheer scale of the U-turn compared to yesterday is quite shocking. Have a listen to this.
Should parents of primary school children in England send them to school tomorrow morning?
Yes, absolutely, they should in the areas where schools are open. And
so Johnson was talking up how safe schools are, why we should all go to school. Yesterday, it really does make me question, did he know he was lying? I can only assume he did. But why? Why would you do that to yourself and your political standing? Just from a purely opportunistic, self-serving point of view, why would you scupper yourself and your public image in such an overt way? It defies belief for me. Maybe there's a reason. I can't see it. Just to throw us off the scent or what? There's been a serious improvement in tone, policy and politics here, right? In terms of the politics, they covered the free school meals thing. Great. They seem to be papering over many of the cracks that were very obvious, and the injustices that were very obvious in March, and indeed through the summer, and in the November lockdown. The tone was welcome. Johnson didn't act like a buffoon. He did stick to script, and he did seem genuinely anguished at having to do this, meaning maybe there's a tiny shred of coherence in his articulation of libertarianism, just a tiny shred. The man is essentially an empty vessel, but he did seem genuinely anguished at having to bring in restrictions like this, as you'd hope any leader would be. But they are wholly necessary, and we need his full commitment in implementing and enforcing them. But we need more of a carrot than a stick approach. Being punitive here won't work. We need public consent. We need to take the public with us on this. The politics of this, it likely will play out quite well for Johnson. we will see. We need more economic support for people, for businesses, particularly for people. We need to incentivise them to self-isolate. We need the government to not just learn the political lessons, learn the practical lessons, and work on putting in test, trace, vaccination programmes, all these things that we needed to do originally, put them in place, particularly the testing and tracing infrastructure, in order to ensure that we don't have to have another lockdown. Because the vaccinations are not a panacea, they may not come into effect immediately on a sufficient scale. I also want to see all teachers vaccinated, therefore ensuring that schools can open sooner than they would otherwise. We need full furlough, bringing back of the full furlough scheme, and turbocharge it basically. And I want to see because we have some incarnation of that now, but I want to see the ambition of March and double it. And at the same time, I want to see something like a universal basic income brought in. I think the public would support that. I don't think it would cost more to the Treasury than all the other schemes. So I think if the government wants to really meet the moment and remake the political map in their favour, they should seize this second chance, do it right, get the testing under control, and bring in a universal basic income, forever changing the political settlement in Britain. Of course they won't, because their donors don't want them to do such a thing. Let's have a listen to Keir Starmer on this. Just quickly though, I think the solidarity that we saw in March has definitely taken a hit. It was, 10 months ago now. We're a lot more polarised than we were at the beginning of that lockdown. The polarisation sort of shifted away at that point. This will be supported overwhelmingly by the public. It will make, it's not true, but it will make Johnson look decisive. And there will be a rally around the flag effect, potentially. But if it does happen, it won't be that big. Might happen, but it won't be. If it does, and if people look over the failings and basically put some last residues of their faith in the government, it will not be anywhere near the rally around the flag effect we saw at the beginning of this pandemic. There might not even be a rally around the flag effect, but there is sufficient resentment towards the government. But again, if they handle this right, all will be forgiven in the eyes of the British public. Let's hear what Keir Starmer had to say before this happened.
The virus is out of control. Everybody can see that. The tiered system clearly isn't working. And we all know that tougher measures are necessary. And so I say to the Prime Minister, don't say in due course. Why delay? Have national restrictions and bring them into force as soon as possible. Those restrictions are now necessary to get the virus back under control, to protect the NHS, which is near breaking point this January, but critically to create the space for the rollout of the vaccine. And that now needs to be mission critical. And if we're asking the British people to be subject to tough national restrictions, and we are, and that needs to happen straight away, then the contract needs to be that the vaccine programme is rolled out now as quickly as possible. And by that, I mean 2 million a week in January and double that in February. We were the first country to get the vaccine. We need to be the first country to complete the vaccination programme. That has to be the basic deal. But we can't have the Prime Minister saying, in due course, we need it now. And that's why I'm calling for it today.
Keir Starmer, acting in his role as Deputy Prime Minister, Leader of the Opposition, essentially saying everything he wants the government to do as soon as Robert Peston lets him know that this is everything the government's going to do. We've had utterly spineless opposition. I hold Keir Starmer in nothing but the most severe contempt, in the most severe contempt right now. Utterly spineless, has not proposed anything of any merit, has not really said anything, sat on his hands, finally said the stuff about the schools and about the lockdown as soon as he knew the government was going to do it anyway. If he had pushed, which Jeremy Corbyn would have done as Leader of the Opposition, if he had pushed, lives could have been saved. This could have been done sooner because the political pressure and the political onus would be on the government. For all the talk of effective forensic opposition, they're not putting pressure on the government. What the hell are they doing? Starmer needs to propose an alternative roadmap. If we see more press conferences from the government, I want to see Keir Starmer bring up alternative press conferences where he sets out an alternative roadmap out of this, puts on his big boy pants, and actually, strap on a pair, propose some policy directions, and help in the effort to get us out of this mess. Sorry about that. There's just a paper bag on the desk, which I'm trying to move away because every time I move my arm, you just get the nice sort of in the background, which we love. Love it when there's a paper bag on your desk in the studio. Now, on to the second story of the day. Of course, there'll be more on this on days to come. But over to the States now. And President Trump pressured Georgia's Republican Secretary of State to, quote, find him enough votes to overturn the presidential election and vaguely threatened him with a criminal offence during an hour-long telephone call on Saturday, according to audio recording of the conversation. Have a listen to this. It's about 5 minutes. This is a leaked phone call of President Trump talking to the Georgia Secretary of State.
We have won this election in Georgia based on all of this. And there's nothing wrong with saying that, Brad. You know, I mean, having a correct, the people of Georgia are angry. And these numbers are going to be repeated on Monday night, along with others that we're going to have by that time, which are much more substantial even. And the people of Georgia are angry. The people of the country are angry. And there's nothing wrong with saying that, that you've recalculated.
Well, Mr. President, the challenge that you have is the data you have is wrong.
Now, do you think it's possible that they shredded ballots in Fulton County? Because that's what the rumor is. And also that Dominion took out machines. That Dominion is really moving fast to get rid of their machinery. Do you know anything about that? Because that's illegal.
This is Ryan, Germany. No, Dominion has not moved any machinery out of Fulton County. We're having.
Well, but have they moved? Have they moved the inner parts of the machines and replaced them with other parts?
No.
You sure, Ryan?
I'm sure.
You should want to have an accurate election. And you're a Republican.
We believe that we do have an accurate election.
No, you don't. No, you don't. You don't have. Not even close. You're off by hundreds of thousands of votes. You know what they did, and you're not reporting it. That's a criminal offense. And you can't let that happen. That's a big risk to you and to Ryan, your lawyer. That's a big risk. But they are shredding ballots, in my opinion, based on what I've heard, and they are removing machinery, and they're moving it as fast as they can, both of which are criminal fines, and you can't let it happen, and you are letting it happen. I'm notifying you that you're letting it happen. So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state. So tell me, Brad, what are we going to do? We won the election, and it's not fair to take it away from us like this. And it's going to be very costly in many ways. And I think you have to say that you're going to re-examine it, and you can re-examine it, but re-examine it with people that want to find answers, not people that don't want to find answers. For instance, I'm hearing Ryan, and he's probably, I'm sure, a great lawyer and everything, but he's making statements about those ballots that he doesn't know. But he's making them with he did make them with surety, but now I think he's less sure, because the answer is they all went to Biden. And that alone wins us the election by a lot. So.
Mr. President, you have people that submit information, and we have our people that submit information, and then it comes before the court, and the court then has to make a determination. We have to stand by our numbers. We believe our numbers are right.
Well, under law, you're not allowed to give faulty election results, okay? You're not allowed to do that, and that's what you've done. This is a faulty election result. And honestly, this should go very fast. You should meet tomorrow, because you have a big election coming up, And because of what you've done to the president, you know, the people of Georgia know that this was a scam. And because of what you've done to the president, a lot of people aren't going out to vote. And a lot of Republicans are going to vote negative because they hate what you did to the president. Okay? They hate it. And they're going to vote. And if you would be respected, really respected, if this thing could be straightened out before the election. You have a big election coming up on Tuesday.
That's President Trump there, sounding wholly incoherent and, you know, indulging in lunacy, frankly. He sounds unhinged. The snivelling cowards that make up his cabinet must act, invoke the 25th Amendment, remove him from office. He is unfit to serve, mentally, you know, objectively, apolitically. We're hearing talk of this as well now, extending the date. This is all very sinister, right? This is the president saying all this stuff. Extending the date of the inauguration, which is something that's been talked about, is a non-starter. I'll quickly debunk that. The reason it's a non-starter is it would make, on the 20th of January, Nancy Pelosi the acting president of the United States. It would not allow Trump to remain in office. To be honest, hearing all this makes us look good, right, politically in Britain. I have no more words for it. It's utterly bizarre. I want to see action after the presidency, legal action to discourage the next Trump from doing stuff like this. If he gets away with this unscathed legally, then the next Trump strongman is going to try it again. I want there to be a very clear disincentive to do such a thing again, because if there isn't, we're well and truly stuffed. Finally today, Julian Assange cannot be extradited to the US to face charges of espionage and of hacking government computers. That's declared by a British judge today. Lawyers for US authorities are to appeal against the ruling, which rejected arguments that the WikiLeaks co-founder would not get a fair trial in the US, but blocks extradition on the basis that procedures in prisons there would not prevent him from potentially taking his own life. Wearing a mask and a navy suit, the 49-year-old listened from the dock at the Central Criminal Court of England and Wales as the district judge, Vanessa Baresta, initially knocked down arguments by his lawyers, one after another, and accepted the US authorities' assertion that his alleged activities fell outside the realm of journalism. But turning to evidence by medical experts about Assange's precarious mental health, she said, the overall impression is of a depressed and sometimes despairing man, who is genuinely fearful about his future. I find that the mental condition of Mr. Assange is such that it would be oppressive to extradite him to the United States of America. Assange has been taken to Belmarsh Prison before an application on Wednesday for his release on bail, which will refer to conditions at the high-security prison in South London against the backdrop of the worsening COVID-19 pandemic. The appeal will take place at Westminster Magistrates Court, which has essentially been sitting at the Old Bailey for the extradition hearing, although legal experts say they would be surprised if bail is granted. The case against the 49-year-old relates to WikiLeaks publications of hundreds of thousands of leaked documents about the Afghanistan and Iraq wars, as well as diplomatic cables in 2010 and 2011. Prosecutors say Assange helped the US defense analyst Chelsea Manning breach the US Espionage Act, was complicit in hacking by others, and published classified information that endangered informants. Assange denies plotting with Manning to crack an encrypted password on US computers and says there is no evidence anyone's safety was compromised. His lawyers argue the prosecution, this is true, is politically motivated and that he is being pursued because WikiLeaks published US government documents that revealed evidence of war crimes and human rights abuses. This is good. It's a win in terms of him not being extradited. Justice has been served in that sense. The next priority is to get the poor man out of prison, right? This is not a repudiation of the effort to oppress journalism. Your average reporter is still not safe to expose the secrets of the establishment because, as you can hear, they shot down all the arguments. This was done on mental health grounds. It's quite telling what public figures have gone out, put their neck on the line and talked about this today. Not many of them have, and I do think that is quite telling. Jeremy Corbyn did speak up, and put it this way, with Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister, he would have stood up for Britain through this. He would have stood up for Julian Assange, and he would have been fierce in calling for the US government and its aggressive authoritarianism to back down. Those that touted Corbyn as weak on foreign policy would renege on that fact, because the fact of the matter is, out of any prime minister we'd have ever had, he would have fought the hardest on this, and quite right too. It's very depressing, the news that we hear. There is not much. There's not much to hope for in this, other than the fact he is out.
Claimed that the charges were political. She said she found no evidence of any more hostility in the Trump administration to anyone.
So obviously not out, not being sent to America.
And she went through all of these arguments, dismissing the defence case. But then she came to the situation of the mental state of Julian Assange. And on that, she came to the conclusion that if he were extradited and he were taken to an American prison, in the total isolation that he would likely face, she said, and to quote his words, "I'm satisfied that the procedures described by the US will not prevent Mr. Assange from finding a way to commit suicide. And for this reason, I've decided extradition would be oppressive by reason of mental harm, and I order his discharge."
So what happens now? This was the Old Bailey. Is there going to be an appeal?
The Americans have said that they are likely to appeal. They've got 14 days to do so. And then, at the moment, this is, just a district judge has made this. It could go up to the High Court and then the Supreme Court. So there is a process to be underway. So the Americans have 14 days in which to lodge that appeal. The interesting question is what happens to Julian Assange now. There's been a request that he be bailed, because if you think about it, he has been in detention facing these charges in Belmarsh prison for the last 21 months. Before that, he spent 7 years voluntarily holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy. So this is a man who has been confined initially voluntarily and subsequently by the state for a very, very long period of time. And the question now is, well, will he get any bail conditions? Will he be allowed out or not? And that's been decided at the moment.
And how long could the process go on for if there are appeals? Because, as you say, it involves someone who is incarcerated. If it comes to an end, he would be free to go. It's always you've got to be very careful about judging how long legal process is going to take, but potentially quite a long time. If you think about it, this extradition process, just to get to this point, it's been 21 months since he was initially detained and removed from the Ecuadorian embassy. You've now got a substantial appeals process. You've got to, appeals have got to be granted or not. If the appeal is granted, then you've got the process to go through. So, we're talking, months, maybe years. Thank you very much, James.
I was from BBC News there on the ongoing situation regarding Julian Assange's extradition. Solidarity now and always with Julian Assange and all journalists around the world working to expose the dealings and the corruptions and the abuses of power of their respective governments, wherever they are in the world, whatever flag they fly under. Anyone who prizes themselves on any form of advocacy for freedom of the press or civil liberties should be absolutely on the Julian Assange case. And anyone who isn't is showing their true colours. They're either spineless or in the pocket of the establishment, or both. The Julian Assange case is one of those things where there isn't really a middle ground. You are either on the right side of history, or you're on the side of those who would seek to cow and muzzle investigative journalists, and those that would seek to curtail indefinitely our rights and liberties in terms of freedom of the press, freedom of expression, and the ability to scrutinise and indeed overthrow our governments, as is our right. So solidarity with Julian Assange, solidarity with WikiLeaks, to be honest. Let's bat aside the accusations of Russian interference, of national security, all that nonsense. Just accept that this guy needs to walk free. Don't care what he's like as a person, right? This is completely irrelevant to the situation. I've never met the guy. It's completely irrelevant. now is the time to stick to your principles. It is now. Transcends left and right completely. Okay, that's it from me. I'm back tomorrow at 7 p.m, the usual time, for more MesmePolitics. I've been Toby Joshua, and I'll see you very soon. Toby Le Petit Mesme. Joshua's my middle name.